Something strange happens when you sit still long enough. At first, meditation seems like a practice of control. You are learning to focus, to direct attention, to master the wandering mind. The language of disciplines feels appropriate, even necessary. But if you stay with it, if you keep watching, a different picture emerges. One that is harder to talk about, one that quietly dismantles assumptions you did not know you were making. You begin to notice that thoughts arrive. They're not summoned, they appear fully formed from somewhere you cannot locate. You did not decide to think about your childhood just now. You did not choose to remember that conversation from 3 years ago. The thought simply arose and you noticed it arising. This is where the uncomfortable question begins to form. If you do not choose your thoughts and you do not choose your desires, then when exactly are you choosing anything? And if you're not the one choosing, then what precisely is this you that you have been defending, improving, and blaming all these years? Watch what happens when hunger arrives. You do not decide to become hungry. The sensation appears in your body, unbidden, and suddenly food occupies your attention in a way it did not 5 minutes ago. The desire is not something you authored. It is something that happened to you. Now watch irritation. Someone says something, and before you can think about it, the flash of annoyance is already there. You did not sit down and reason your way into being irritated. The reaction preceded any conscious deliberation. Attraction works the same way. So does the boredom. So does the sudden urge to check your phone, to defend yourself, to say something clever. These are not decisions, they're events, weather patterns moving through the landscape of your nervous system. And here's the part that gets uncomfortable. Thoughts and desires are not separate categories. They're the same phenomenon wearing different clothes. A desire is simply a thought with momentum. A thought is simply a desire that has not yet gathered enough force to move you. If neither is chosen, then the entire architecture of personal agency begins to look different than we assumed. Consider what you inherited before you had any say in the matter. You were born into a particular body with a particular nervous system, shaped by genes you did not select. You arrived in a specific country, a specific family, a specific historical moment. The language you think in was given to you. The categories you used to parse reality were installed before you could evaluate them. Your early experiences wired your brain in patterns you did not consent to. The things that frighten you, attract you, bore you, enrage you. These responses were shaped by forces that predate your conscious memory. Even your capacity for attention, the very faculty you might use to examine all of this, was itself conditioned by factors outside your control. Some people are born with nervous systems that settle easily, others arrive already dysregulated, already primed for anxiety or distraction. Where in this cascade of unchosen causes does the independent you enter the picture? There is a model that helps here, though it may feel cold at first. Imagine that what you call your life is something like an algorithm unfolding. Not a mechanical algorithm, not something dead or deterministic in the crude sense, but a process in which each moment arises from the conditions of the previous moment, cause and effect endlessly cascading. You eat something that disagrees with you, and your mood shifts. Your mood shifts and you interpret a neutral comment as criticism. You interpret it as criticism and you respond defensively. You respond defensively and the other person withdraws. Each step follows from the last with a kind of a terrible logic. Where was the free choice? You can point to moments where it felt like you were deciding, but if you look closely, even that feeling of deciding arose from conditions you did not choose. The sense of agency is itself part of the unfolding. This is something that you can clearly see in the accessible experience. But wait, if there is no free will, does that mean nothing matters? Does that mean we abandon responsibility, stop trying, let everything collapse into passive acceptance? This is where most conversations about free will go wrong. They assume that without the illusion of independent agency, there is no basis for action or ethics. Look more closely. Consequences still exist. If you put your hand into fire, it burns. If you treat people poorly, relationships deteriorate. If you neglect your health, your body suffers. The absence of free will does not eliminate cause and effect. It simply reveals that you are part of the causal web, not standing outside it. Responsibility, understood clearly, is not about deserving blame or credit. It is about recognizing that your actions have effects and that you can train yourself to act more skillfully. The training itself is part of the unfolding. The intention to improve is itself a cause that produces effects. What dissolves is not responsibility but moral superiority, the sense that you are fundamentally better than someone who struggles with something you find easy. The belief that your achievements prove something about your essential worth while their failures prove something about theirs. When you see that everyone is an algorithm unfolding, shaped by conditions they did not choose, something softens, not into passivity but into clarity. Here's a simple practice. When you notice yourself caught in self-blame or in judgment of another, pause. Ask 3 questions. What is arising right now? Name it precisely. Anger, shame, the urge to criticize, the desire to be right. Do not try to change it yet, just see it clearly. What triggered this? Trace the chain backward. What happened just before? What conditions made this response more likely? Lack of sleep? An old wound being touched? A pattern learned decades ago? You're not excusing the response, you're understanding its causes. What is the next skillful step? Given everything that has led to this moment, given the conditions you did not choose and the patterns you inherited, what action is most likely to lead toward less suffering? Not the action that proves you're good, not the action that punishes you for being bad, the action that actually helps. This is a much more honest form of engagement than simply trying to bypass negative emotions. Freedom, it turns out, is not what we thought it was. We imagined freedom as the ability to stand outside the causal web and make unconditioned choices, to be the unmoved mover, the author of our own story, the captain of our soul. But that freedom does not exist. It never did. It was a story we told ourselves, and the story created as much suffering as it relieved. There is a different kind of freedom available. Not the freedom to choose your thoughts, but the freedom to choose your relationship to them. Not the freedom to escape causality, but the freedom to see it clearly and respond with skill. This is responsibility in its truest sense, the ability to respond, not from the illusion of independent agency, but from the clarity that comes when you stop pretending you are separate from the unfolding. The more clearly you see causality, the less you need cruelty to improve. You do not have to hate yourself into being better. You do not have to punish yourself for patterns you did not choose. You can simply see what is arising, understand what caused it, and take the next step. That is enough. It has always been enough. So if you do not choose your thoughts, what exactly is you? Perhaps you is not the thinker. Perhaps you is the space in which thinking happens. The awareness that notices the thought arising, watches it pass, and remains when it's gone. Perhaps you is not the controller but the witness, not the author but the reader, not the wave but the water. You're not smaller than you thought, you're larger. You're not the isolated self struggling to control an uncontrollable mind. You're the openness in which the entire drama unfolds. And from that openness, something remarkable becomes possible. Compassion without conditions. Action without cruelty, change without self-hatred. The algorithm keeps unfolding, but now you are watching it with different eyes. What would change if you stopped blaming yourself for thoughts you never chose?